It's actually the same as yesterday, strangely. I can't remember the last time that happened. It's probably only happened once before. That Elon Musk raises $7.14 billion for his Twitter bid from the Saudi Prince Al Walid, Larry Ellison, Sequoia, Binance, Andreessen Horowitz, and others. Yeah, we read that yesterday. Or it must be a slow news day. There's two. Wait, maybe I need to refresh the tab here. Is that what it is? No, it's the updated version. Legal.
Tyler,
Yes.
it's a very interesting thing that it is the top of news, but I also have been doing some deep dive research around just going back a few years, speculating or sort of going down the rabbit hole of what we talked about or what you've been sharing about the speculation of the BFFs between Elon and Jack.
Mhm.
And I've done a little bit of not a little, quite a bit of research to find out some information regarding some of the people that were hired by Blue Sky and some information that Blue Sky is going to collaborate with Twitter. So it's very interesting. These go back as far as 2019. So I find it really interesting that all of this is now coming to surface, but I'm now beginning to feel more solid that this has been a planned event.
Right. Yeah, you and I remember you and me
We were talking about it for a while. That's why I
with
said
our
I found it
tinfoil
really.
hats like 3 months ago, suggesting this when the word blue sky was first
That
mentioned.
was that was June of 21 when I
Yeah.
went to the Bitcoin conference and I heard Jack speak and
Right.
how calm, cool, and collected he was.
Yes.
Because
That's right.
remember they wanted to oust Jack as the CEO. Remember they wanted him to step down. Do you remember that article?
I remember the
They,
lady in the audience screaming at
what?
him,
Yeah,
and he was like, "Let's talk about it."
yeah. But in 2019, I believe there was an article that said that the board members or the shareholders wanted Jack Dorsey to step down.
Okay.
And then, like, within a few months after, maybe about 6 or so months after, I think a year and a half after that, I'll look at the dates. Jack Dorsey resigned as the head of Twitter. But like this chronological order is really interesting because he is, if you follow the tweets down the rabbit hole of Elon at the time that that was all happening, you could see that his BFF is Jack. And you could see that they were talking about it. And actually, Jack Dorsey did say that if anyone, he would trust anyone with to decentralize Twitter, it would be Elon. So there's a lot of telltale facts of over the past 3 years of just it's too hard to pass over that this wasn't something that they were really engaging in and discussing and ideating over dinner,
Right.
over BFF conversations. You know what I'm saying? Because we this
Yes.
was June of 21 and now we are almost June of 22, a
Right.
year later, and this has happened.
Yeah. I know.
Do you
So
think some of these founders ever regret going public versus continuing private, other than the windfall of the money, but the loss of control to the boards?
yeah,
I
well,
think every single company experiences that at some point in the
I
the
know.
founders.
I was at a dinner um, where there were a bunch of the CEOs. Maybe to put a number on it, maybe 7 or 8 of them of the folks that we read the headlines every day about. Like it was like Uber. Travis was there. There was a bunch of others, and they were all making the same point about delaying the IPO as long as possible, sort of for that reason. They wanted to stay private as long as possible. And in fact, Marissa Mayer from Google, who was still at Google at the time and reported directly to Larry and Sergey at the time, and she said that even they had wished they had stayed private longer and kind of look back at the fondness at the when they were private, and she said that if they went IPO in a time when it was normal to do so a bit earlier, and how Google wishes it could have dragged that out longer, like the startups today do with bigger later stage fundraising rounds.
Elon himself has handled this in SpaceX as well during the earlier years when people were calling for it to go public and citing that it would be best for the company and whatnot. And he quashed it basically with the fact that if you're such an expert in the markets to give me, the CEO, advice on whether we should go public or not, then you wouldn't need to be working here. You'd be playing the markets and earning yourself many, many, many multiples of zeros. So, he's a phone
You enjoying
user
shopping,
himself. No, that's a scooter.
Okay, so the next one that I have is that legal experts say that Elon Musk's new funding for Twitter could draw scrutiny from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. I got to be honest, I've never heard of that American agency. To scrutinize the deal for potential national security risks, 6 regulatory lawyers not involved in the transaction by Reuters said. And this is similar to the potential national security risk that TikTok faced, for example. The next one I have is from the New York Times, that Elon Musk's hate for ads conflicts with Twitter's business model, as ad execs say they will move spending elsewhere if the company relaxes content moderation. And that's just the New York Times. Can't leave this alone. Yeah. Well, no, it goes against Jack's. Jack himself tweeted that he thinks the ad network is one of the biggest mistakes Twitter ever made. So, New York Times is just losing it with headlines like that. The next whole separate story is from Bloomberg, says they have sources that China has ordered government agencies and state-backed companies, that's all the big Chinese companies, by the way, to replace foreign computers with domestic computers running local OSs. Oh boy! Oh wow! Within 2 years, China has ordered.
That's a big deal.
That is a big deal, and let's be incredibly clear why they're doing that. A monkey could figure out why they want to do that. As I said, the biggest. And by the way, you better believe if they're going to do the same for the phones. And by the way, they've already done the same for the phones. They're already using Huawei phones with Huawei's operating system. They're going to force them to not use Apple phones or all the... they already have Xiaomi and Huawei. Guaranteed they're using those phones. And they're going to use almost certainly Huawei because Huawei has their own operating system, which will have to be separate from Android, essentially, like a fork of Android that Google has no control over, with a separate Play Store, which it does. It's called Harmony Play Store or whatever it's called.
Tyler, is this for PCs?
Yes, for PCs as well.
Oh, they're going to run into, the users are going to run into a serious issue called lack of drivers. It's hard to stress how many. One of the main benefits of Windows is drivers and wide support for drivers and testing of drivers. The users are going to find a lot of peripherals don't have drivers for a long time. That'd be my projection.
For sure.
I wonder if they'll just do a flavor of Linux, mate.
For sure they will. But the point is, this goes back to my very strongly worded rant a week or two ago, that the nuclear option for the U.S., did I not say that if the U.S. ever really wants to go balls to the wall with somebody, we would force Microsoft, very notably Google and Apple, to freeze all of the incoming or outgoing data on the devices in Russia, for example, or in China. In China, again, almost seems like they're reading my goddamn emails or listening to our conversations, understands that, and is preemptively going to work to neutralize that threat.
I remember you saying that at the when Russia first invaded Ukraine. You started saying that.
Yeah, I called it the nuclear option in the cyber war, that the U.S. could always do that if they really needed to, and China fundamentally understands that, and they cannot risk being dependent on U.S. hardware and operating systems. And so they're now taking precautionary preemptive measures, which they should do. And again, I applaud their goddamn genius for doing so. It just shows that they get it. They always have got it. They totally understand it. And good on them for not waiting to get being lazy about it and waiting for it to come and bite them in the ass.
There's a flip side to this, maybe partial consideration, is that the fact if they're using Windows, for instance, in the global hacking community, obviously they are vulnerable to the same sort of bugs that the US systems are vulnerable for, but it just makes you ever more considerate when you're developing 0 days and storing 0 days, the fact that your own users can be targeted by it. If they develop a completely proprietary operating system, then US hackers and anybody else in the world can basically go balls to the wall and develop whatever they want without any worries that it would spill over into localized systems.
Soon and into, I'm just reading some tweets about this. Okay, next, Wall Street Journal. It's about whistleblowers that Meta, formerly known as Facebook, deliberately took down pages for hospitals and other Australian institutions in 2021 as a negotiation tactic over the news bargaining law. I remember that. And by the way, that story is the genesis of tech news around the world. That story, that drama, is precisely the first story that gave rise to the birth of tech news around the world. So what happened was, because we didn't really cover this in tech news around the world, because it was the story that preceded tech news around the world, Facebook, there was a decision in Australia that would require Facebook to charge Facebook users money. No, I'm sorry. Facebook would be charged money by the Australian government every time a Facebook user posted a link to an Australian publication, like any of Rupert Murdoch's publications, for example, because that's who really was driving this. He was the big publisher who had the Australian government's ears and got them to do this. Because he's losing money, because people aren't going to his websites anymore. They're reading stuff on Facebook, and they're taking his links, and they're sharing them on Facebook, and they're not going back to his site. And he sees the writing on the wall that being a news outlet in 2021, 2022 is a losing proposition because people aren't going to news websites anymore. They're getting their news in other forms. And so he wants the platforms that people are getting their news to pay when people are sharing his content on their platforms, right? So Australian government, being for hire apparently, ostensibly, said, okay, Rupee, we got you, baby. Hey, Mark Zuckerberg, Mr. Zuck, sir, you're now going to have to pay every time a Facebook user puts a link to Rupert's stories on your platform. Just a few cents. And Mark said, motherfucker, say, what? What the fuck are you talking about? I have to pay money every time a Facebook user puts a link to Rupert's stories. Well, we have a very simple solution for that. No one will be, anytime anyone tries to put a link to any of Rupert's or any Australian media stories, we'll just tell them, sorry, that link is not valid. We cannot post that. And by the way, the 24-hour, that happened immediately with no warning. And the Australian government started crying like a little bitch as soon as Facebook did that. Instantly. Screaming, oh my God, this is so unfair. Holy shit, we didn't see this coming. How dare you, sir, respond this way? And Mark says, suck it, baby, because it's my platform. If you don't want me sharing your links, you got it. Get the fuck out of here. We do not need you or even want you. Go jump off a cliff. And Australia said, well, wait, sweetheart. Slow down. Pump the brakes. Can't we figure out something? And by the way, your hospital site on Facebook, now this is what was reported the day after. Not only were Facebook users not able to post anything, really anything, to any Australian media, also somehow, magically, a bunch of hospital Facebook pages were also taken down at that same time, in that same 24-hour window. Now, what the Wall Street Journal is reporting today is that there's a whistleblower claiming that Facebook deliberately took down the pages for the hospitals and other government agencies that was intentional, because Facebook said, "Oh, that was an accident in our rush to move the code around to adjust for this new change." And oh, sorry, we took down your hospital and government websites or whatever. But we'll fix that, and they apparently did fix that. But the whistleblower is saying that it was deliberate. That's what this headline is about. So, but by the way, even if they did do that intentionally, well, the sad part is they lied about it. They said, "Oh, it was an accident." But even if it was intentional, is there? I mean, that's shade, that's sinister, that's Machiavellian, that's kind of almost psychopathic. But is it illegal? Well, no, certainly not. Facebook can kick any page off of Facebook that it wants at any time for any reason. So it says last year when Facebook blocked news, I'm now reading from the Wall Street Journal article. Last year, when Facebook blocked news in Australia in response to potential legislation making platforms pay publishers for content, it took down the pages of Australian hospitals, emergency services, and charities. It publicly called the resulting chaos inadvertent. Internally, the preemptive strike was hailed as a strategic masterstroke. Facebook documents and testimony filed to U.S. and Australian authorities by whistleblowers allege that the social media giant deliberately created an overly broad and sloppy process to take down pages, allowing swaths of Australian government and health services to be caught in its web just as the country was launching COVID vaccinations. Well, consider adding the COVID dynamic, that makes it really psychopathic. The goal, according to the whistleblowers and documents, was to exert maximum negotiation leverage over the Australian Parliament, which was voting on the first law in the world that would require platforms such as Google and Facebook to pay news outlets for content. Despite saying it was targeting only news outlets, the company deployed an algorithm for deciding what pages to take down that it knew was certain to affect more than publishers, according to the documents and people familiar with the matter. It didn't notify affected pages in advance. They would be blocked or provide a system for them to appeal once they were. The documents also show multiple Facebook employees tried to raise alarms about the impact and offer possible solutions, only to receive a minimal or delayed response from the leaders of the team in charge. After 5 days that caused disorder throughout the country, Australia's parliament amended the proposed law to the degree that a year after its passage, its most onerous provisions haven't been applied to Facebook or its parent company. We landed exactly where we wanted to. Go ahead.
What I don't understand is why can't they make money on TikTok and all these platforms themselves like everyone else does? Why don't they hire just some cheap kid influencers to share all their content in a very smart way and make money this way? Are they just too good to do that, like too snobby because we are intellectuals, we don't do this type of thing? Is that the deal? Or I don't understand. My son comes up with smart videos and got approached recently by a company. I don't understand. It can't be that hard.
I'll explain. It's because they don't want to build their business on someone else's platform.
Well, they can use all the platforms. I mean, then they have to build their own platform. That's totally unrealistic.
They have their own platform. It's called foxnews.com.
Yeah, but nobody cares about that platform, so they have to have additionally use other people's platforms like everyone else does, like we do, like everyone does, right? I mean,
non-mainstream media does, yes.
That would make it very hard, Katerina, for them to push the narrative of social media bad, etc. It's very difficult to hold those two things. It's traditional media's war against social media as bad, but also depending on it for a large percentage of its income.
But that's being snobby, and that's exactly why they will die, because they are not being flexible. They are not able to adapt to the current reality, and that's when you die.
But
I mean, you have to be able
feel
to
that
adapt.
they provide a very valuable service with the reporting and the journalism that is kind of unique to them, and they want to be paid for it. Of course, they'd like to be paid on their own websites. They are participating in these platforms, but as soon as the platforms become their primary source of viewership, those platforms can dictate who where the eyeballs go, and then they will be under the thumbs of Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg, and they really don't want to put themselves in those positions.
Well, I'm not saying they should forget about their dumb website. I'm just saying that they should create an income through those websites or through those platforms. And, I'm a great researcher too. If I don't sell my ass to NIH or any other funding resource, it doesn't matter how great I am as a researcher. Everyone has to sell themselves in order to get money, no matter how good and great your service is. You can get a pat on the back for that. That's it. You have to make money also, right? So you have to adapt how nowadays in this world you can make money. So that's how they are like something like a national public radio, which they are not. They are a private company. So they have to adapt to how private companies make money nowadays. And it's through those platforms. I mean, that's just how reality is. Get used to it. Or be funded by the government, then you have to listen whatever the government says. You have to always listen to somebody anyways.
Yeah, they're dying. This is not unique to journalism. Many industries have gone through exactly this, and it's mainstream media is going through it at the moment. And that's by the way, why you heard me say on the last story or two stories ago about the New York Times. Elon Musk's hate for ads conflicts with Twitter's business model. Blah blah blah. It's just the New York Times meddling and projecting essentially their own demise and their own loss of ad revenue onto the future of Twitter, which frankly they don't give a shit about. They don't want an ad network. And why is the New York Times trying, speaking negatively of the future of Twitter and Elon? Because these platforms are correctly envious of these platforms, because that what people have shifted their behaviors, their consumption, media consumption, from directly going to mainstream media sources to these platforms, and it's game over. It's just a slow, agonizing death for them, essentially, as consumers get better and better cameras, and with higher and higher resolution, and faster bandwidth, and everything else. It's like, by the way, and less agendas. Like your average person who happens to catch George Floyd on a street corner with their camera. By the way, that was a citizen who caught that, not a news outlet, right? Like in days of old, how it would have happened. And the person with that video camera themselves didn't really have an agenda or sponsors. Or, what's truly kind of fucked up is we have no clue who that person was. That's some of the most important video that was caught in in recent years. And we have not a clue. I mean, I'm sure we could find out in a Google search, but nobody knows the name of that person or whatever. So, but that's how news is going to get, that's how the sausage will get made henceforth. And it doesn't bode well for mainstream media that the citizens have these platforms and distribution and reach and virality and to generate our own news.
Well, they still can do the international stuff and put it into context of bigger history stories and whatnot.
Yes and no. Yes and no, because the experts and pundits that they bring on their shows, on their platform, their website, can go to Twitter themselves directly and regurgitate what's happening in their own voice from their own Twitter account or Substack or whatever. And those are the people that I follow, are these people who understand these issues in Ukraine deeply or on COVID deeply. And I follow them very directly on Twitter. And I don't have to wait for them to appear on CNN to get asked what their opinion is. I'm already following who I think are the most relevant experts on any given category directly. And so that you're right, that is what they need to fall back to, which is bringing in experts to add important context to the conversations du jour. But if you even bother to, you can find those people yourselves on these platforms as well. So even that is that well of opportunity is drying for them simultaneously.
So I think they really dropped the ball with social audio. That opportunity was there. This is what this room is about. But we're talking for many, many months now about verified, potentially regulated news outlets and reporters and that kind of thing hosting these rooms. And I've seen a few. I've seen a couple of them. But I don't know whether it's my algorithm or whether it's just the lack of real dedication to it. I don't see as many. I really thought that you could potentially have like CNN, rooms and Fox rooms and New York Times rooms and those kind of publications and really connecting with the people again, especially on Spaces. But I don't know what the reason is. It may be a chicken and egg thing in the fact that they look at the numbers and they realize that rooms statistically just have a very small amount of connectivity with users compared to the energy you have to put in. But also the reason why is that the platforms aren't that popular because there's not enough quality content. So, yeah, I feel like everybody's sort of dropped the ball with this a little bit.
I got to touch on that one for 2 seconds. Hold on 1 second. On the Twitter Space issue, you bring up a really interesting point because I and several other people on this stage have been in Twitter Spaces together, including the Bloomberg rooms that were going on for a minute.
They're the only ones I've seen, yeah.
Right. And New York Times does them as well. Several others do. But the first thought that will enter your mind if you go into those rooms is, wait a minute, the person, the Twitter account that's moderating this room has 6 million Twitter followers or 20 million Twitter followers, and yet there's only 100 people in the room. What's going on when only 100 of your 6 million followers are willing to listen to this room?
Bots.
Right. Well, who knows? But there's the second question that will come to your mind if you sit there for any length of time is, wow, these journalists are really bad at speaking, public speaking.
Yeah. I think you responded to me, right? Yeah, on the text, yeah.
Sorry, Annette.
No, sorry, Tyler, you're spot on that. Because the question is, do the journalists really want to interface with the public, regardless of the size of the audience?
No,
exactly.
And let me
dictate to
the skill set.
So we need a new type of journalist. This is the point.
Correct.
And I was going to say that the fundamental reason is that the content wouldn't be better than what we're getting here.
Right, but the traditional journalists, and I have many very dear friends who are professional journalists, and journalists as a group, as a sociographic group, are very socially awkward at any dinner party conversation. They're usually the most socially awkward person at the dinner party, like really remarkably socially awkward. Like they really struggle, and they're very capital A. A matter of fact, not even capital A, just all caps, awkward. And the people who like radio disc jockeys, the Howard Stern types or what have you, that is the type of personality which is nearly polar opposite of a traditional journalist. By the way, like this outspoken, gregarious. Type that what I'm trying to I'm struggling for the words, but I think you know what I'm referring to. That personality type is the opposite of those editors at Bloomberg and everything else that you see. They, of course, the exception here is like the CNBC hosts that you see, or even CNN anchors, but very rarely, if ever, are the TV hosts and anchors the actual journalists. In fact, they never are.
So Tyler, are you talking about introverts
do you think it's
extroverts?
Extrovert. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
And do you think it's because one set of, the journalists are used to referring to talking points as opposed to the radio personalities have to think on their feet? with a response and come back with a response. They've got to really be quick-witted. Perhaps that's behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, journalists are intentionally very slow with their thoughts in a very written, prose-like way, very crafted, very considerate, very deliberate,
Very methodical.
very methodical. And the radio disc jockey, how's it going? Good morning, California. How you doing? Is a totally, completely, utterly polar opposite personality type. Free shooting from the hip, charismatic. It's just everything that your traditional journalist is not. And so that's why there isn't this easy transition for them to go from their Twitter accounts to their Twitter Space accounts.
Well, what I would counter with
I
that
still
is that. Sorry, I'll be very quick. What I would counter with that is that it was the same as the transition as some of these places actually using social media, in the fact that the standard journalists didn't start doing that. They spun up departments and divisions that would handle that were professionals in that. The same as SEO, the same as marketing. You have a department that is dedicated to that. And that's where I wanted them to go, really. I really wanted to see that kind of professionalism in social audio with dedicated departments, doing research, connecting with people. We've had some amazing people on this stage and in this group that could easily speak on a stage, if they wanted to, could easily be contacted by one of these outlets and actually discuss this with their insider knowledge, potentially, maybe stuff that's not. Obviously, there's you've got to be careful what you say and whatnot, and going on record and all of that. But there just seems to be a way there that they can evolve and do this as a side gig, and I haven't seen that dedication, and more to the loss of all of us.
yeah, they don't want to. I don't know if you realize when the first TVs appeared, they were completely snobs about TV. All the intellectuals. They said, TV, this is for dumb people. Oh, great, now the world will be dumb because of TV and stuff like that. And I mean, it's a very silly show, but also interesting. Julia Child about the first cooking, French cookbook in America, and then also a first cooking show. They were like, it was on National Public Radio TV in Boston, and nobody wanted to take the show. She had to pay for everything herself, for the setting, for the food, for everything, she was successful since the first pilot show, and they were too snobbish to admit it, and they didn't want to run the show. They just didn't have money, and she had money, so they did it anyways, and she paid for the first episodes completely out of pocket, and she was a
Honestly,
successful
she was.
show, but they were
Honestly, the
snobs.
CIA paid for her, but we'll leave that off.
The CIA, I mean, anyways, yeah. But anyways, they were complete snobs about it. Nobody wanted to take it on because it's not intellectual enough how some housewives cook. And the same snob intellectual thing is going on now. That's what I think. That's what they could change in an instant. They just don't want to because it's too dumb for them to be on social media. It's like sometimes when I do the Science Society invitations for scientists, most scientists are quite open about it. Some think, oh no, social media, I don't do social media, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, then be left behind. It's like intellectual snobbishness.
Tyler,
Katerina,
Tyler, there's
I
there's
have
a
a word for you.
So,
Frenzy Verbudung.
okay.
What does that mean?
Huh? I thought it's a German word. It's okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry.
yeah, Tyler. There's a guy in Baltimore named Porter Stansberry, and he wrote that he went to dinner. He and another libertarian contrarian investor named Doug Casey. They went to dinner with Ann Coulter, who's a famous conservative pundit that goes on Fox News, and it was in New Orleans. And she had somebody with her that was kind of like a bodyguard and also like a handler. And every time they asked her a question, she had to consult with him. And it became very apparent that she didn't really know history, and she had make sure she consulted with them because she was afraid of getting the wrong answer to just social questions that they were doing. And so if that's the kind of person that you're referring to, yeah, I can see where they would be a little awkward. Maybe a lot of it just is from insecurity, because they, like, again, they don't have to think on their feet like the radio talk show host that you were talking about.
Okay, so we got to get through the next story here. The next is that the CFTC orders BitMEX's 3 co-founders to pay $10 million each for not registering with the agency because they were operating as an exchange without the right papers, and failing to implement anti-money laundering and KYC checks and, the regular shit that governments are going to force you to do. The flaming hoops that you must jump through to comply with governments. And they weren't doing that, and they got shut the fuck down. And now they're having to pay $10 million each. Okay, next is Block, formerly known as Square, does their quarter earnings report. Revenue down 22% year over year. Well, that's not good for a startup. Profit up 34% year over year. And Cash App Bitcoin revenue down 51% year over year. Stock is down 5%.
Is that not going to be bundled up with the general trend of crypto and blockchain at the moment? There's a lot of uncertainty and potential regulation and everything else. Everything's sort of even more, it's somehow got more volatile.
Well, he started out as a traditional fintech when it was originally kind of consumer driven, and then they quickly went into kind of the POS market and had a rather good offering in that space and got rather enterprisey or SMB-ish. And then they really did a bit of a turn into the whole crypto thing. And, being a fintech alone in 2022 is a bit of a harsh space to be in at the moment. And to be a fintech and a crypto fintech is doubly icy in, May of 2022.
Yeah, there's a lot of alternatives. What are you bringing to the table that's unique?
Yeah, the whole space has got really crowded. Next, something called Untamed Planet, which uses Roblox to create nature-themed games, incorporating NFTs, raises $24 million. A blockchain-based gaming startup raised $24.3 million in a Series A funding round led by Animoca Brands. The next one from the BBC, that the UK's DCMS plans to give the Digital Markets Unit powers to clamp down on big tech's predatory practices, following reports the UK shelved such plans, which we read yesterday, did we not? Large tech companies such as Google and Facebook will have to abide by new competition rules in the UK or face huge fines, the government said, which I'm sure they would love to send those large fines to them.
Is it basically the UK trying to fill the hole that was left, one of the holes left over from leaving the EU?
Yep. Microsoft partners with Epic to offer Fortnite for free through Xbox Cloud Gaming with or without a subscription across Android, iOS, iPadOS, and Windows PC. The tech giant Microsoft is experimenting with offering free-to-play games through its streaming service. It's just a variation on the theme of these streaming platforms. You have the video streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus, and you've got the game streaming platforms like the Microsoft Xbox Cloud Gaming. And they battle for content, just like Netflix does and Apple TV does. And they're offering it for free because they want to get the market onto their subscription platform. Next, from Axios, retail crypto exchange Crypto.com says it now has over 50 million users, up 5x from late 2020, and expects to hit 100 million users by the end of the year. So another 2x, making it 10x from 2020. Not too bad. I guess that's what the Super Bowl ads were all about, or renaming the Staples Arena to Crypto.com Arena.
Tyler, I would
Yes.
be curious to see what happens after the Formula One in Miami, because they're also doing a massive, massive drop of an NFT project that actually will take the track and the sounds and convert them. I posted it on my LinkedIn. It's absolutely brilliant and epic at the same time. They're going to take the sound and they're going to convert the sound from the race, from the Formula One, into digital art. And then you're going to be able to buy that NFT. And it's all going to be done live. They've hooked up that whole track. You just have to see the video. I mean, it's crazy. So I think they're going to get even more. And I'd be curious to see how many they get after that, once they execute that next big bang of a strategy. Because the Formula One, I mean, that's a big outfit in itself.
But the Formula One fan in me is very saddened that they're doing this in the era of the V6s and not in the bygone era of the naturally aspirated V8s, which just sounded beautiful. Still cool, but
Yeah,
those days
Carl,
gone by were so much better.
I think you'd actually like the video, and I know a number of people were commenting it on my LinkedIn because it was just so, I mean, if you see the intersection of NFTs, artwork, take transforming sound, transforming sound into art. And what they're transforming is the immutable event of that Formula One that's in Miami. And it's also going to be interesting because I believe Max Verstappen from Holland will be one of the top three drivers, because I believe Lewis Hamilton's there too, isn't he, Carl?
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be really funny to see who actually which of the drivers join in with this, especially because there's already a lot of existing sort of political furore about the whole Netflix access and everything else and how they're represented. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. It would be nice if it was something other than a publicity stunt.
But isn't it this weekend? For sure it's this weekend, I think, or no?
Yeah, I think it's this weekend.
I think I
It
think
wasn't
they
last,
start
so 2 weeks,
they
so I
start
think so.
today, I believe.
Oh, the recording, I have no idea.
No,
This
the
is, yeah.
actual race, the actual Formula One in Miami.
Yeah, it should be this weekend, I believe.
That's what I thought. Anyways, Tyler, the long and short of it is that I'd be curious to know how much their enrollment increases by this event.
Okay. Yeah, me too. The next story is it's from Reuters about a company called Pachama, which uses AI and remote sensing to verify forest carbon credits. And the reason they're in the news because they just raised $55 million, led by Future Positive and Biz Stone, one of the co-founders of Twitter. So that in itself is quite cool because it helps remove one of the barriers to people to monetize growing biomass. If we can correctly incentivize everyone to grow and use land to capture carbon very effectively at scale, it's an important hurdle to overcome here, this one. So it's very cool. So kudos to them for that, for doing something very meaningful. The next is Reuters says they have sources that an Indian court puts a hold on the Enforcement Directorate's decision last week to seize $725 million of Xiaomi's money in Indian banks. So an Indian court has put a hold on the Federal Enforcement Agency's decision to seize the $725 million from local bank accounts of Xiaomi from China. Put a hold on the decision to seize. So they're just going to get their money out. If the court says, no, you can't seize their money, wouldn't you, if you're Xiaomi and the federal government agencies are seizing your money and then an Indian court says, no, you can't do that, wouldn't you get your money out of those accounts just to be safe?
Wrong as soon as possible. Yes, quick decision because it's just like several days.
Maybe they just had to pay one judge to do that?
maybe we should have the X-File music, but it's really a quite convert, of the original decision. Yeah.
My view is that it obviously was counter to the Chinese-Indian, friendliness pact, and they got told to reverse the decision. And I don't think they'll have to move it if they can move it, if you know what I mean.
The relief granted on condition that Xiaomi will inform authorities of royalty payments. Okay.
They already did inform. They had been saying, if I remember it correctly, that royalty payments were due, but they were just saying that those royalty payments were a way of avoiding capital controls in India. But they must have been told from on high that China's Xiaomi is an important player and don't screw with them.
Mm-hmm. Also, there was another that led to another thought in my mind that just ran out of my ear. It'll come back. Okay.
If you're going to pick on a company, you should pick on a smaller company, I would have thought, than Xiaomi.
I hate that feeling when you have a good thought and it just evaporates. And the next story is a whole bunch of fundraisings. TechCrunch says they have sources that OnDeck, which connects founders with capital and advice, laid off 25% of its staff, or 72 people. US, just a whole bunch of fundraising announcements, essentially.
So Bill Gurley has been giving advice that everybody should batten down the hatches, that after a 13-year bull market, we should expect that valuations won't be the same, and that there's going to be a re-rating. So I expect we'll see a lot of fundraising as people try to top up the coffers before the anticipated, the equivalent of March 2000 is what he's trying to forewarn.
Yeah, Sequoia did precisely the same thing in 2007 with their RIP Good Times deck that they sent out to all their portfolio companies, which we were a part of at that time. And then that deck got leaked out to beyond the portfolio companies, and Sequoia made the same argument, like, hey, look, shit's about to get tough to fundraise, do it now while you can. And do it at whatever price they're offering. So
when Gurley tells you that's going to happen, he's saying, that they're re-rating, and everyone else is going to say, well, if he's re-rating, we're re-rating. The difficulty is everyone who raised money at very high valuations is going to have to do down rounds, and that's going to make people unhappy. And the valuations they're going to see, the unicorn valuations are just, as they say, Luftgeschäft, air business.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because this happened on the heels of a major market downturn, in the 99-2000 Web 1.0 bubble popping. And here we are again with another significant market correction, for lack of a better word.
But this is an unbroken golden thread that goes back to 1992, in fact, and was, the beginning of this policy was in 1999 when Alan Greenspan saved the market with emergency interest rates. And yet again, we are having to go through the rate rising cycle in order to take the rates down again. So, hold on, everybody. We're on the way up to come all the way back down.
Okay, so now we get to go into the tweets that everyone's been sharing.
Tyler?
Yes?
Sorry, I wasn't listening just now, but did you touch on this UK not issuing license to Revolut?
No.
Yeah, it's a new one that came out 11 minutes ago, so you can just refresh.
Okay, thank you.
I already pinned it on top.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Is it down at the bottom? Where is it there? Let me see. Okay. Lack of UK license thwarts Revolut's ambition. Revolut's quest for a UK banking license is the critical piece missing for the $33 billion fintech to achieve global super app status, but its crypto approach and the war in Ukraine have stopped the process from moving forward. The co-founder, Nikolai, who spoke at my event just before COVID, has hoped to have a license buttoned up by the start of this year, but British regulators are still on the fence, and the Russian attack on Ukraine has only thrown another obstacle in the works. Hint, hint, wink, wink, because he's Russian, I guess. Headquartered, why else would they mention the Ukraine in the context of a fintech getting a license? Headquartered in London and founded in 2015 by Storonsky and Yatsenko, Revolut began as a prepaid card offering low-cost foreign exchange fees. The company quickly expanded its product and services offering and branched out geographically. The fintech applied for a banking license in the US last year. At the time, the CEO said that obtaining a US license was an integral part of the journey to build the world's first global financial super app. In the UK, regulators' concerns over Revolut's crypto trading unit center on the way the company approaches transaction monitoring and know your customer, known as KYC. An unnamed source told Bloomberg that Revolut has had a deal with multiple contacts at the FCA, and each time start from the beginning. Quote, "We take our regulatory and compliance obligations extremely seriously," a Revolut spokesperson said. "We have constructive, productive relationships with over 22 regulators around the world. Our relationship with UK regulators are among the most long-standing. The war in Ukraine also brings attention to the company's Russian ties. We are not in normal circumstances."
You have to look at the cap table. They have DST Global, Yuri Milner's firm, sitting in the Series C, and I would expect that anyone who's got DST and Yuri Milner, who is obviously a big player in the tech web 2.0, will have issues because, as one is given to believe, that money is tied to our friendly dictator in Russia.
It says, the Bloomberg article ends, the last paragraph says, the war in Ukraine also brings attention to the company's Russian ties. That the CEO is Russian and the CTO is Ukrainian, and both have British passports. Revolut has an office in Moscow that is in the process of closing, according to people familiar with the plan. Having met the CEO, that guy doesn't give a poop about, what's happening. I don't mean that to belittle what's happening. I mean, he's not like a Russian agent by any stretch of the imagination. His co-founder, the CTO, is Ukrainian, for Christ's sake.
I think you've got to look at the UK giving charter to a company that's also doing crypto, that is also run by Russians, but has a large shareholder in Yuri Milner, and connections directly to the Kremlin is something that the British banking authorities do not want to see anyway. So I think that it's probably a dual or double-edged action.
Yeah,
I think what we're going to see here more than anything is KYC, because in the crypto world, that's just it's impossible, and that's where everyone's going to run into a wall.
Revolut already do KYC. It's a fully KYC platform. The issue is the commingling that could occur and the pressure that could be brought because of the nature of the shareholders.
Okay, so now into the tweets. A man who paid $2.9 million for an NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet, which is the first tweet in all of Twitter, is set to lose that $2.9 million. This is from The Guardian. The purchaser of that NFT at the time of the purchase said, "This is the Mona Lisa of the digital world," says crypto entrepreneur Sina Estavi, who bought the NFT in March of 2021. I remember that was right when we were starting tech news around the world. And now that people know more about how NFTs work and how he's basically bought himself not
JPEG.
something that points to a tweet which can be deleted. I think he now realizes it'd be interesting to see what he thinks now. But anyway, people don't find it as valuable as he did at the time of his purchase. I wonder if he does. So the next is from Jeff G. That harassment, and by the way, I think Dr. Fran also shared this one from CNN, that harassment is a problem in VR and is likely to get worse. If you believe Mark Zuckerberg, the future is virtual. Right, but aren't they limiting the distance that people can approach each other in the metaverse to stop the virtual groping? Yeah, and you don't have anything below the waist as a floating avatar either. So I guess genitals don't really factor into the equation. The last year, Facebook plowed $10 billion into Facebook Reality Labs. Zuckerberg went as far as changing the company's name from Facebook to Meta. With its shift to the metaverse, the company must see a fresh start from mistakes of the past. Harassment has a long history in digital spaces, but VR, literally in-your-face medium, can make it feel much more real than on a flat screen. And companies behind several of the most popular social VR apps don't want to talk about it. Meta, along with popular virtual reality social apps, declined CNN Business's request for interviews about how they're fighting harassment in VR. Yeah, they don't want to talk about that, but they can tell by the way you're asking the question that you have an agenda and they don't want to participate in your fun and games. And that in itself is indicative of where the relationship between tech and journalism in 2021, 2022. Where it used to be the tech companies were more than happy to respond to the likes of CNN Business and Business Insider and whatnot. And now they're being told by their investors, don't bother responding to these knuckleheads. They hate tech. They hate you. They want you to die. And we're better off going and doing our own outreach through our own channels.
Well, now they have politicians representing them. They will control all the dialogue.
Yeah, but this is an interesting one because mainstream media, at least, in some ways should be threatened by the metaverse, because when you're in the metaverse, how we consume news is not likely to be in mainstream media's favor.
I'm not so sure about that. I think that the metaverse is, the way to think about it is just the volumetric internet. And in the same way that you'll have buildings, you'll have billboards, and you'll have mainstream news outlets that will buy a presence and will broadcast news, etc. So I think it's more of a digital twin that one is going to see. I don't think they're afraid of that. I think that Facebook is realizing that the best protection is to say less rather than provide a surface to reflect off. And they should have learned that from Larry and Sergey, who have managed to avoid all of this by not putting themselves front and center. I mean, they have played this game perfectly, including breaking up their own monopoly in order to avoid any, inquiries. It's just, well played Larry and Sergey, and badly played egomaniacs like Zuck.
Right. But the bread and butter of mainstream media, to me, still seems to be text, black text on white backgrounds generally. And that doesn't translate so well into the metaverse. I don't think we'll be reading lots of text in the metaverse. If the question is, and it's not a foregone conclusion that they won't or can't do this, is how will they recontextualize mainstream media into the metaverse? It's a huge open field opportunity.
Wouldn't you go and visit it, right? So if you had a news item, wouldn't you think that you could recreate the scene and go and witness it live for
Right.
sort of first person witness of these things, and you go and step into, let's take, for the sake of argument, JFK's assassination, and you could be on the grassy knoll, and that
Right.
you could watch it yourself with your headset on. Isn't that what's going to happen? It will become almost like the news is in America today, where they cover the aerial chase of a low speed, and they keep that on like 30 minutes on CBS News, following some car around, riding through the city, OJ style. Isn't that the nature of the future? Is dumb it down further and move away from the text?
Yeah. However, I think with the ubiquity of ubiquityness, what's the word I'm looking for? The of
Ubiquity.
the ubiquity, the ubiquitous nature of high resolution smartphone cameras that are ever improving, and the rendering technologies of late, where you can convert what appears to be like a 2D video into a 3D video, or a 2D image into a 3D image. We might be able to make metaverse experiences out of any kind of smartphone, and it might not be that long before smartphones have sort of 3D metaverse generating cameras.
Yep, that's for sure.
Which
They're
might
already
make
doing it. If you saw
right,
Snap's glasses and the way that they were,
right,
advertising that,
yeah, precisely right. So,
the
and
embedded
by the
stuff.
way, they could put together multiple videos from multiple witnesses who are in the vicinity. So if you have multiple cameras from multiple angles, then they could really do that with a quickness. But I think that bodes
And you
well.
can stitch those pics together. I was actually on the phone with
Right,
Matt, who invented that technology yesterday,
right,
and that's exactly what Microsoft bought that company, I think, that stitched pictures together to give you a 3D
right.
holistic image.
But I think these things again challenge mainstream media's historical monopoly on, you know, putting you at the scene of, the Rodney King beating, or or even, as I mentioned 30 minutes ago, the what was the gentleman in Minneapolis who had the knee on his neck?
George Floyd.
George Floyd. How the person who made that footage in 2021 was sort of forced, that content got stretched into the traditional media formats, where if in a futuristic metaverse that we might spend a lot of our time in, I wonder how that content might more directly benefit the person who captured the content.
It would be in the form of an NFT, and then royalties paid back on it.
That's what I would hope and imagine. I sincerely hope that in the future, the people who actually capture the content will be able to more directly monetize it, and that we will more directly experience it. And not just for breaking news, but just in bridging geographical barriers and boundaries and gaps, so that people can feel what's going on in fucking Ukraine. I can just imagine, as emotional as people are about what's going on in Ukraine, to have a metaverse experience of that. My God, it could
They
potentially,
had metaverse Iraq experiences, and
yeah,
they actually use them to train the military and treat people with PTSD.
yeah. I think we're not far off from people having where the hardware will get simple enough, where it'll get more embedded into everybody's everyday devices, rather than requiring specialized hardware, cameras, and when we get to that,
Tyler?
yes,
Yeah, I just want to make about the article, because the article is really about people being accosted in virtual reality. And I
sure,
think that, while most people realize that it's not real, there is a certain subset of the population who can aesthetically experience those approaches very real and even without haptics feel them, and they do get traumatized. So we have to acknowledge that. I wish Erin was here because she often speaks to this. And the second part is that when talking about measures for helping with the possible abuses, it sort of trespasses onto privacy concerns, because what a lot of the companies are doing is monitoring the verbal content that's being produced in the virtual worlds. And then, they're figuring out using AI and people whether or not these are, people are who are at risk I'm sorry, I have a really bad headache, who are at risk of accosting people and then moving in. So it's a little bit of a privacy rights issue. I'm done.
I agree with Dr. Fran. Everyone who is participating in this world, the only way to avoid, as we said before, bots and civil type problems is to have verified identity. And that's probably the reason why they don't want to talk about it, because the way you solve this problem is with identity. And of course, with identity comes the loss of privacy and civil liberties and massive asymmetry. They already have that massive asymmetry where they know more about you than you know about yourselves. Plus, they know all of the archetypal things, cohort related stuff that will trigger you as well. So if you're in a veterans group, for example, and you're playing, and you're going into a war zone, in the same way they can, put, triggering warnings, those things, because they are realistic and because they are eye tracking your emotions, etc. They will have major issues on this front, unless they start to integrate identity and start to decide for you and assist you, in inverted commas, to make better decisions, in inverted commas.
Okay. Next up is from Alexandra. With the class action suit and SEC disaster, she's talking about the Coinbase's NFT marketplace gains less than 150 users in the first day open to the public. Yeah. The Coinbase NFT marketplace opened its beta to the public yesterday, but the platform hasn't seen much activity so far. Okay. The next is from the Wall Street Journal. Oh, we covered that one. And there's Dr. Franz that we just discussed. And Jeff G. found this one from CNN about a doctor who's mailing, a Dutch doctor prepares to mail abortion pills to women in the U.S. Why abortion rights activists are turning to mail-order pills. Abortion rights activists say mail-order pills may be the most effective and discreet way for women to get the procedure.
Well, it's no longer discreet now, is it, Tyler?
Well, funny. There's a funny trend happening with food delivery companies. There's a hamburger delivery company here in Thailand who names their hamburgers things like stapler and whiteboard and all of this, so that when you order at work, it appears on the receipt that you were buying supplies for your office.
Oh, that's kind of slick, though.
Is there one that's called Post-it?
Say what?
Post-it.
Yes. Post-it notes. Simon gives us an update on Amazon's Cape Town HQ. I remember this one from months ago. Amazon's working to build a large facility in Cape Town, near, what's the name of that glorious geographical feature there in Cape Town?
Table Mountain.
Table Mountain. And that's sacred lands around there by the indigenous folks there. And that was part
of it. It has the widest array of natural, it's like a conservation zone on Table Mountain. It has a giant ecosystem out there.
And I remember when we read this article a few months ago that it was debated as to whether Amazon would get approved to build this large African headquarters there in South Africa because of the sacred land issue. And the headline today is that there's a shocking setback for Amazon's Cape Town headquarters. And I think we know why. But there you go. And thank you to Simon for giving us that update from South Africa. The next is from Dr. Fran and others from San Francisco Gate, sfgate.com, that buy now, pay later sends TikTok generation spiraling into debt.
This is
Buy now,
Ken's
pay.
subject, surely. Ken, this is your moment.
Buy now, pay later may be jeopardizing Gen Z's financial future in just 4 easy payments.
I'll give Ken's answer, which is that he always thought that they were subprime lenders, and of course the subprime lenders get the pain when the market turns down and rates go up. So I think Ken's view was clear that the firm and those guys. Oh, here he is. You can
Yeah,
give your
Mayor.
view.
I was just listening. It's very early. I know it's early for you too on the West Coast, so I'm just listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, but you should voice that view. It's correct about
No, I
those
know. I was about to
subprime
say,
lenders.
but you were doing such a good job. So yeah, and you could look at the firm stock and how it's done. It's reflective of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying basically with rates going up, the buy now pay later guys who were really subprime lenders, unsecured, are going to suffer big losses and are not going to see as much
Well,
volume
yeah, but
just because
my
of
thing with the
market cap.
interest rates with them was with buy now, pay later. I thought that they were basically a business that really was dependent on kind of these like zero rates because that's how they were able to break up these payments and not really charge interest supposedly because their interest cost was nothing too. But once they have an interest cost, I think that's a problem as well. I never really understood why they were that different than a regular credit card company, other than they're giving more liberal terms, okay? Such as zero interest or whatever for, 4 payments. And that makes them basically, um, what's the term you just use? Um, Subprime lender, yeah. So, those two things combined. But we'll start seeing because we'll see when they start reporting, whether their reserves, and charge-offs need to really go up.
Tyler, you should probably keep your eye out for information regarding Klarna as well, because they should find themselves in the same situation in a declining market with rising rates.
But Karma's a private company. I'm not sure they have to disclose
No,
anything, right?
Klarna, not Klarna.
A Klarna
Klarna.
is what I meant. But I think they're private though, right?
True. That's
Yeah,
a
so they're
great
not going
example.
to.
Yeah, we were
Yeah,
talking earlier, an hour ago, about how some companies are intentionally delaying IPOing. Klarna would characteristically fit under that. They are really stretching out that IPO years beyond where people thought it would happen.
if
Catch
you
up
look
with
at
they've got to catch up with the valuation. That's their issue. Is that everybody who came in at the high highs are not going to be happy to go into a public offering below the last round. So that's really the issue. Is can they grow the business enough?
but also if you look at all of the fintech space, it's gotten clobbered, and because a lot of this stuff really wasn't like new technology. It was just kind of like the spin on it, and they were subject to the same regulatory issues, and whether they were a bank or whatever. And you could just see it in a lot of companies, whether it's SoFi, which that was the one fintech that I thought might have a shot, and still might because of who the CEO is. I'm very favorable to the CEO, but Lemonade or any of these companies, I mean, they've all gotten destroyed because basically there's really not as much special about them as everybody thought there was. I mean,
I
that's
agree.
my view of it. Yeah.
You're completely correct. And this is where markets behave in a certain way. I always see fintech as the last of the Web 2.0 guys, because at the end of the day, as you said, all they've done is put a digital front end on what you could consider to be analog money businesses, which is to say the reconciliation is the same and the mechanisms are the same, which is why they had to go and seek, like the Revolut story is a perfect example. They cannot evolve the product if they don't become a bank, because the way you make money as a bank is lending money. And these guys have been really just doing payments and the low value stuff. And the regular money center banks, that's Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, etc., for those who don't know what money center banks are, those guys who dominate, the big five that dominate the banking industry, have improved their offerings immensely, including Wells Fargo, whereby you can now effectively do digital payments. The innovation, however, is in the ability to create financial products that everybody can participate in, which is going to come through crypto, because the savings that you get are real, not imaginary. You have reconciliation, you have the back end, you have if this then that composability. The issue for most of crypto is that there are massive user barriers in traditional EVM models, etc., and there are also barriers in terms of in order to get on and off, you have to go through the Coinbases of the world, which are regulated centrally as well. So that's why you've seen the big crypto guys move towards getting banking licenses and to partnering with large financial institutions in order to get cover in this way. So it's just a natural evolution. But the fintech guys fundamentally are learning that you only make money if you lend people money.
Okay, next up, more tweets. Poppy found one that we talked about yesterday, that Apple, Google, and Microsoft will soon implement passwordless sign-in on all major platforms. And next is also from Poppy, that OpenAI's new image generator, DALL-E 2, sparks both excitement and fear. The new text-to-image generator has a remarkable ability to create and edit pictures, and some people are worried, very notably the people at Photoshop, because this thing can whip up pretty much any image you can describe with a rather scary detail. And that's the next article from Fortune.com. Move over Photoshop. OpenAI has just revolutionized digital image making. The breakthrough could help designers and computer games companies, but also supercharge toxic memes and disinformation campaigns. I hadn't really thought of that. You can make some really sick memes very, very quickly. DALL-E 2 can create original, realistic images and art from text description. It can combine concepts, attributes, and styles, which is kind of great for making dank memes on demand. And it is a precursor to the Star Trek holodeck. Imagine what happens when it's not just creating images, but entire metaverse experiences. Which is only incrementally more challenging from an engineering perspective. The New York Times. Poppy found an interesting headline from the New York Times titled, "The Myth of the Genius Tech Inventor. We idolize founders with brilliant ideas, but triumph often results from business savvy combined with imagination." So the New York Times is no friend of tech founders, if there was any doubt. Now, the next one turned a light bulb on for me. This next one from Poppy via the BBC, that Bill Gates on Elon Musk feud and Jeffrey Epstein meetings. And now seeing those three names together in one headline made me realize why Elon Musk might have some interest in Twitter and what Twitter might know about Jeffrey Epstein and his DMs and his relationships and whatnot. And I wonder, as Bill Gates continues to make very plain that he's no friend of Elon Musk's, that Elon could be in a position to retaliate or reciprocate a bunch of heat on Mr. Gates by revealing some unknown yet unrevealed truths about Jeffrey Epstein and his affiliations or associations with Jeffrey Epstein.
Exactly. That's why the articles are out there, or the stories are out there. Can you at least release one name? Anyway,
Was Jeffrey Epstein someone who would tweet? Because I would think he would be someone who always wanted to stay in the background.
Epstein's tweet. It's earlier we were talking about an article or two relating to Musk, especially now that he's at Twitter. It's not about Epstein's tweets, but what is being communicated to the general public is why can't we see the list of who Epstein's boys were and everything like that, of which would implicate some of the names that have been mentioned so far. That's the point.
I think the Epstein story needs to be understood in the context of statecraft and the likelihood that, just in the same way that Putin collects compromat on people, I really do believe that Epstein was an agent. Whether he was a single agent or a double agent is open to question. But I think that the access that he had to the entire array of the capitalist and intellectual world was in order that he could collect compromat that could be used later. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
Okay, next up. Thomas Tong found one about water scarcity predicted to worsen in more than 80% of croplands globally this century. Our agricultural water scarcity is expected to increase in more than 80% of the world's croplands by 2050, according to a new study. And there's a map of where the water will decrease and by how much it will decrease, and where it will increase and by how much it will increase. And oh, looky there, I'm in the middle of perhaps the biggest increase, according to this map. And I can confirm that because I'm having torrential rains day and night in a time of year which is known as our dry season. So if you are interested in this thing called life and this concept called survival, you might want to look at this map. Because if the food supply and supply chains start getting wobbly, and you want to live in a place that has water, which is kind of a prerequisite for this thing called food that you might enjoy from time to time, you might want to find yourself in a place that exports food and is going to be getting more water and not less, because moving to a place that exports food that is going to be getting less water would be a little counterproductive at this point.
This map is really interesting considering most of northern Russia is dry, and Africa looks like it's going to be getting quite a bit of water.
Right. Central Africa will get more water. Southern Thailand will get more water. Australia gets drier. The south of America gets considerably drier. It's an interesting
So, like
map.
in and around the equator,
Yes.
it looks like there's a lot.
Right.
Yeah, these kind of models are really helpful, but I would just put a big caution, and I don't know if Chris is on the line as well, but the predictive capacity of what climate change is going to do 10 years out is pretty treacherous territory.
Agreed.
Yeah, but we know that there's going to be some winners and some losers. The question is,
Absolutely.
what's the net impact?
Right, and one of the related winners and losers that's not on this map is where we're investing heavily in wind technology. How do we know where the best wind location is going to be in 10 years? It's going to be pretty wild.
Yes, good example. That's why I wanted to point out my own little anecdotal experience with being in April, in May, where I am in the Gulf of Thailand is traditionally our hot, dry season. We just had the wettest, unbelievable deluges of water that rival our monsoon season during our dry season. So, and that's, by the way, our wet seasons continue to get wetter and longer. Normally, the wet season is confined to about 4 weeks. It stretched out into 16, 17, 18 weeks. And this seems to be a developing trend that I'm watching with intense interest, as you might imagine. But over the past 6 years that I've been here, this is the trend over the past 6 years. It's getting wetter and wetter and wetter and wetter and wetter. Almost unbelievable amounts of wetness happening at this stage. So the next one is from Thomas Tong, that there are mountains of sugar hidden in the ocean, and we only just found out that some plants, seagrass, produce sugar during photosynthesis, and seagrass is perhaps more common than any land grass, I imagine is the point they want to make in this article. Hidden below the waves, the ocean contains vast reserves of sugar that we never knew were there. According to new research, scientists have discovered that the seagrass meadows on the ocean floor can store huge amounts of sweet stuff underneath their waving fronds, and there are major implications for carbon storage and climate change. The sugar comes in the form of sucrose, and it is released from the seagrass into the soil underneath, an area directly affected by the roots, known as the rhizosphere. It means seabed sugar concentrations are some 80 times higher than they would be normally. Worldwide, seagrass could be sitting on up to 1.3 million tons of sucrose. To put it another way, that's enough for about 32 billion cans of Coca-Cola.
Just what we needed.
Yes, just in time. Just when we thought we reached peak sugar. Big seagrass steps into the picture. So thank you for that one, Thomas. The next one is that scientists have pinpointed the brain cells that die in Parkinson's disease.
Hang on, Tyler. Before we get to that article, so is it theoretically then possible to harvest seagrass if we're having issues with crops above ground? Would that be an alternate way to, get sugar below the surface of the sea? We can't grow it on the land anymore.
I imagine. We're going to have, no doubt, humans are going to stretch creativity to new lengths, as necessity is the mother of invention. So no doubt we will find ways to get that to scratch our sugar addiction one way or another. We need a fentanyl of sugar is basically what we need. The next article that I have is from Jeff G. from CNN, that Russians steal vast amounts of Ukrainian grain and equipment, threatening the season. Russian forces are stealing farm equipment and thousands of tons of grain from Ukrainian farmers in areas they have occupied, as well as targeting food storage. That's unfortunate. And the next is from Jeff G. From CNN.
It shows that they're going for a siege, is what it shows, right? You're going to starve them out, and that they are affecting the global wheat prices anyway. So it just shows that they're digging in, I would have thought.
Yeah. The next from CNN, the headline says, China's economy is going backwards. China's gigantic services sector just contracted at the second sharpest pace on record as COVID lockdowns hit businesses hard. The Beijing Purchasing Managers Index, a closely watched indicator for assessing the state of the economy, plummeted to 36.2 in April from 42 in March. According to a survey released by IHS Markit on Thursday, a reading below 50 indicates contraction, while anything above that gauge shows expansion. The services sector amounts for more than half of the nation's GDP and over 40% of its employment. And with the survey data showing China's manufacturing sector is also shrinking last month, the world's second biggest economy went backwards in April. So it's shrinking.
Have we got anyone in BB or who can just shine some light on this? It just seems so counterintuitive when other economies are just throwing caution to the wind that they're continuing with this policy, which seems, very very
Oh,
caring, shall
I
we
guess,
say? But
Nicholas,
it
you
doesn't seem they must know something we don't know.
yeah, Nicholas, you didn't join the room at the beginning, right? Because Tyler already shared the answer. because it,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
yeah,
I missed it.
President
But so there is something we don't know.
It's just a reconfirm of what is going on in China because President Xi wants his will to be continued, and the zero COVID policy is his will. That's the answer. And because yesterday she had a meeting with all the high-ranking officials, high-ranking leaders in CCP, and he announced it publicly, and it's on the Western news media as headlines as well. So, where is the article? I can send
So
it.
the conclusion is that it's Xi's will, and so that's what is making him turn China backwards, and for what that he's that seems like it doesn't seem like a plausible explanation.
I think, Nicholas, I think there is internal politics within CCP itself. So there is a few opposition, and the Shanghai clique is one of the biggest one. And she cannot so-called lose his re-election opportunity in October because he wants to continue to control the CCP, right? So he must hold on to this zero COVID strategy, because if he say that it is not working now, it will be kind of admitting that his decision making is incorrect, and that the Western way of living with the COVID is a better way, which will be devastating for him because CCP is not democratic, right? They are communist, so they can easily replace him and ask him to step down. And of course, he doesn't want that to happen. And it has been
I
shown
think
that
he's
he
got a
has been
pretty. I
weakening
thought he's got
his
a pretty
opposition.
strong hold on power there.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure there is very strong opposition now within the within the CCP itself. So I think he has to be very careful with what he do.
Yeah, but Cheryl, so what you're essentially saying is that, which is true. So he's got a Politburo, whatever you want to call it. So he's got it's like being the chairman of a CEO of a board of you've got a board of directors. But so now think of it that way. Do you basically maybe slightly take the accelerator off, acknowledge maybe we need to recalibrate, or does he have a massive public uprising that absolutely would probably cost him his spot? So I mean, it's not clear to me that the zero COVID policy is going to help him stay in office. Because this, I mean, they're only going to be able to contain this public resentment so long. I mean, so I don't know.
And another reason because he can order anything under this zero COVID policy, and that's a way to cover the the autocracy thing in that's for the benefit of the nation. On the and Nicholas, the headline of CNN for Xi Jinping's policy is like this: it's Xi Jinping sends warning to anyone who questions China's zero COVID policy. And of course, it's translation, but in Chinese, the original article it's really strengthened that. Don't doubt my decision. Some you can actually it's like 100 words like article, but the principle is like that. I have said that, and this is something that we must make it successful, and we will succeed, and we will win the battle. And just
But the only way you can win that battle is by cutting China off from everyone else in terms of people are going to fly in and out of the country. So, I just don't. I
yeah,
just don't
but
understand. There's
prior
something
to
missing here. There's a
Well,
piece
yeah.
of information missing.
What's the possibility that this is a wag the dog to distract from some other risk that's gone bad?
But you can
There's
see,
always that
that
possibility.
from last year, the old crackdown on high techs, right? On the like for the online tutorial industry, or this e-commerce or this streaming commerce, and actually it's also from the CCP or from C's order to do this crackdown. And imagine if Lei or if she lifted all this crackdowns and encourage, actually it's already on the news, encourage them to do the same thing they did previously. Actually, the economy, especially all these tycoons, they were forced to step down as CEOs, and they can regain less situation or less status overnight. So it's just like the head of this wagon. They want the direction and they can change it immediately. So
If I
now,
was going to,
yeah.
sorry,
Oh, okay, Nicholas, please.
no, I was just going to postulate. While you were talking, it just occurred to me that the only reason that I can see outside of all the other reasons that you just posited is that in reality, the continuation of the COVID lockdowns creates supply chain pressure, which is the inflationary pressure that is causing the decoupling of the yen and the what has been known as the coordinated central banking era, which has been the era that we've been in since the GFC. It would seem to me that if I was trying to support my Russian friends without supporting my Russian friends, that's what I would have done. And so it seems to me that the COVID zero policy that makes no sense is really a pressure point on the Western supply chain, and that is probably something to do with the pact that was signed at the Olympics between Putin and Xi. That occurs to me to be a plausible explanation.
Well, now you're getting really interesting because the last article that I have for today is from Jeff G. from CNN that shipping delays are back as China lockdowns ripple around the world. Global shipping was just starting to recover from the chaos of the pandemic. Now port congestion and delays are back and could be around for a while. And you're right that the combination of attacking Ukraine from Russia's side and China's zero COVID lockdowns, if happening simultaneously, could restrict.
Not good. Jerome Powell noted in his Fed address that the pressures that are supply side shocks, which are, in the 70s, we just had the oil shock, but we have many shocks that are going on, and inflation is something that the Fed has to do something about, or it threatens the entire system. So
Right.
if one was looking at a system-wide attack where they said, look, it's worth the pain, because what it does is it collapses all of Europe, it collapses all of the dependent dollar, euro dollar and derivatives monetary system, it will be worth it. So you've got a oil price spike that comes from Russia, Ukraine, and the gas
Right.
price paradox in Europe,
Right.
and they have to hold this through the winter because it's not going to work through the summer, of course,
Right.
where we're now in the warmer season, and the 1-2 punch of restricting the supply of goods adds not, so you've got the input costs in the manufacturing, and then you've got the finished goods cost in the CPI numbers. And Powell referred to both in his speech on.
Right, so, but it's the oil, and in large part, a bit of food on the Russia side,
Wheat
and
is a big one. So wheat is a big side. So it's oil, it's food, and it's finished goods.
right.
Plus, India just announced, what was it, yesterday, that they're going to limit their exports on wheat as well.
And
So
they're, of course,
it's
part of
like all
the
of
SCO.
yeah, exactly.
And this will explain why Jeffrey, whatever his name was, the advisor, came out and made it very clear that we are in a Cold War already with the Eastern system. And it's just breaking out, as we said. There's going to be
Was it
the
Jeffrey
Eastern
Sachs?
system, the Western system. Say again?
Was it Jeffrey Sachs?
I can't remember who it was, but it was former advisor to the was it the Clinton administration or the Obama administration who
Yes.
came out and made it absolutely crystal clear that the negotiations have been getting worse, of course, because the US can detect, I'm sure, at state level that this is a coordinated soft support in the same way soft diplomacy is operated by the nation state. This is the equivalent of Chinese soft diplomacy,
I
which
found
is
it right now. Here it is. Jeffrey Sachs. Geopolitical Cold War with China is a dangerous something is the headline. Geopolitical Cold War with China would be a dangerous mistake, economist Jeffrey Sachs says. Economist and best-selling author Jeffrey Sachs told CNBC a Cold War with China would be a dreadful mistake. Sachs said attacking China has become a bipartisan strategy for political gain. He urges global leaders to come together on issues like climate change as the economy undergoes a remarkably choppy period of disruption and transition. He says American politicians are making a dreadful mistake by escalating tensions with China. Economist and best-selling author Jeffrey Sachs told it. Anyway, so maybe it was Jeffrey Sachs.
And my viewpoint, therefore, is if you look at the long-range planning of Xi, and you understand, as Cheryl and Bibi said, that the most important CCP meeting is going to be in October to decide if Xi will continue to be in power, to paraphrase you, Cheryl, would make sense that he could stand up in front of the Politburo equivalent and say, guys, I know this is painful at the internal level, but the bigger picture is here that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reorder the world. And we have our friend Putin, who's disrupting the oil, creating an oil shock. And we have our Belt and Road plan in train. And this is the opportunity to continue to inflict pain. And while we can stand the pain much better than the West can stand the pain. So, I think that that must be the reasoning.
Could be. So, Bibi just found a humdinger of an article from South China Morning Post that Alipay and Wechat Pay are installing new features to help widen the Chinese digital yuan rollout. Oh, wow. Alipay and Wechat Pay, the two big digital payment systems in China, are going to start helping the digital yuan.
And that will have no problem interfacing with the crypto systems that we just witnessed that Revolut was being blocked from their banking license in order to stop them doing the commingling, which is exactly what we'd said. This is the chink of light that will emerge, is that you'll have the digital yuan, as we've always said, which will act as the new dollar for everybody who's against the Western liberal democratic system, who wants to do it their own way and does not want to bow to the dollar and the US. And the mixers will be the decentralized world where you'll use, the people will have no problem using the yuan if it enables them to move money effectively. And the Chinese know this. We've been saying this for the whole time. since tech news began, and way longer than that. So this
Yeah,
is this
I
is
distinctly
all in the trade.
remember some handsome bald tech bro coming in here and saying that this headline was coming.
I
That
keep on hearing about this handsome guy.
he's this loud American tech bro, and he specifically said, "If tell me if I'm wrong, BB, that Alipay and Wechat Pay would be forced simultaneously to roll out the Chinese digital currency."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
here,
yeah. Actually, WeChat Pay has already accepted the digital yuan payment last month, and it obviously were forced to promote digital yuan because you still have to install the yuan app first, then you can pay or accept digital yuan. And yeah, like this handsome bald guy said, yeah. So this month, Alipay then joined this group, because both of these groups, I mean, the Alipay is become Ant group, and the WeChat Pay is under the Tencent group. So they both have their banks. So you have to use the eYuan app to install and connect to these two banks. Then you can pay under WeChat Pay, Alipay directly using digital yuan. But in the long term, it's possible they replaced the paper note, because if you work in the government, you might be paid by digital yuan, or of your salary is in digital yuan. So they have no other ways to pay by the original payment method. So yeah, I think
Just
they
it
get
makes it it,
bigger and
it,
bigger.
it,
Yeah.
make, it
Please.
makes it makes total, it makes total sense, and they have total control anyway. So the digital yuan is has been operating, has been going through these beta tests for a long time, and is already integrated. It's more about looking and saying, look what they're talking about having their own internets, right? Let's talk about the Russian internet. We talk about the Chinese internet. Those protections and this preparation to be able to move away from the US dominated technology backbone as well is part of it. So these are the last pieces that effectively enable a whole block of countries to say to the dollar, thanks very much, guys, but we're not having you tell us what to do because you've got all the money. And that's the real thing that one needs to understand. And it's absolutely crystal clear that we're moving into this new era of I would hope to see a tripolar world where we've got the Chinese and the SCO system, the Western system, and then the Meta, not Facebook Meta, but the Meta decentralized world.
okay, so Casey found one from Bloomberg that just came out 1 hour ago, that a biotech company wants to replace decades-long cholesterol-lowering treatments with a one-time procedure that simply edits your DNA, putting an end to heart attacks by editing human DNA. I'm retweeting it now to the Tech News Twitter account. Verve Therapeutics is targeting cholesterol-causing genes to clear arteries with its experimental therapy.
The
Tyler.
idea you could be so conceited to do that and not expect unintended consequences is just ridiculous.
It's
I mean,
totally ridiculous on the unintended consequences, and it also doesn't address the fact that insulin levels in the blood are one of the
John, John,
strongest risk
John,
factors. Yeah.
let me eat my donut in peace, would you please?
Don't forget
I
the
was just
donut hole.
celebrating with a slice of cheesecake, okay?
Yeah. No, the epidemic of metabolic syndrome, diabetes, obesity, all that is probably as or more impactful than cholesterol alone. And yes, why do we generate cholesterol in the first place. It's a precursor to all kinds of biochemical processes. So unintended consequences are going to be really high risk here.
I'll give you a concrete one. Males convert cholesterol into what's the male sex hormone? Testosterone.
Yeah, and one of the earliest studies showing the benefit of reducing cholesterol, this is like 25 years ago, using cholestyramine, um, had an unintended, unexpected increase in suicide rates among the treatment group compared to the controls. And they wrote it off as being spurious and irrelevant. Unfortunately, subsequent studies of the same issue confirmed that finding. So the fact that cholesterol levels at scale are precursors to a lot of biochemical processes, some of them having psychoactive effects, is definitely a risk for unintended consequences here.
Hey, John, I got two questions. Ken, I got two questions for you on that. One is I've seen some theories or studies, whatever, that suggest that cholesterol is kind of more of a marker of um, like inflammation. That's not the cause; it becomes kind of the result of other issues. And that's number one. And number two, and I guess obviously because that's why there are side effects about on these drugs that I'm about to mention. I guess you can question statin drugs too, because statin drugs are designed to lower cholesterol. And you hear about some rare cases. I actually know one or two people who lost the ability to walk. One of them temporarily, and they got it back after going on a statin drug. So I didn't know if you could address those issues while we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah. To your first question, is cholesterol the root cause, or is it somewhere in a cascade that is not the root cause? And there's some pretty good evidence to support exactly what you just described. That it's sort of a intermediary between inflammation and poor lifestyle. To the second question you ask, we know that the cholesterol levels and the vascular disease in non-smokers 50 years ago, when people were much closer to their ideal body weight at scale. We didn't have nearly the kind of problems we have today. So diet, exercise, sleep, healthy social, those four lifestyle elements have been shown. Dean Ornish, if you haven't read any of Dean Ornish's stuff, he's brilliant. He's been on this for 40 years, that lifestyle modification is the way not only to arrest cardiovascular disease, but to reverse cardiovascular disease. He's just an extraordinary pioneer who's still active in the space. And lifestyle modification with those four factors is a far more sustainable, effective solution than trying to screw with our DNA, in my view.
Okay, so I should put down the cheesecake, apparently. So Tong found one that scientists have pinpointed the brain cells that die in Parkinson's disease. Crucial new insights, and there's even an image, and it shows you precisely the cells. What they found was a group of cells that were highly susceptible to degeneration, which could be prime candidates for therapeutic intervention. The study also shed light on how genetic risk likely manifests to produce Parkinson's disease. Oh, so why not edit? Why bother with therapeutic intervention when we could go in there and snip that DNA? Parkinson's disease is a progressive neurodegenerative disease, blah, blah, blah. You know the idea. But interesting how that last article and this article beg to be part of the same conversation. Now, John, how far off are we from being able to do genetic meddling for people who might have the genetic predisposition for Parkinson's, and to do it safely?
It's interesting because the very first scientific publication coming out of 23andMe was exactly on this issue. And what they showed is there's a known marker that puts you at high risk of Parkinson's disease. And what 23andMe discovered is the 50% of people that never manifest Parkinson's that carry that high risk Parkinson's gene. Their first publication was they discovered another gene that mitigated the risk of the Parkinson's gene. So, my sort of framework for how we think about unintended consequences and how we proceed with genetic engineering is that if you I'll use BRCA, the breast cancer risk gene, as an example. Why does everybody have a BRCA gene? Is it because we're all being punished with cancer for our sins, or is there some useful function of BRCA? And it's currently sort of thought of as a pure risk factor without considering why evolutionary biology has perpetuated that gene in all populations. And so as we think about what we're going to genetically re-engineer here, if we have very simple mutations like sickle cell disease, where it's just an amino acid substitution that could be repaired pretty easily, pretty simply, not easily, simply, that's a very safe form of genetic engineering, as opposed to things as complicated as affecting the whole metabolic system and
So
Parkinson's disease. So I think we're going to see solutions that are safe and effective when we know that there's a very isolated point mutation that we can target. But when we start messing with evolutionary biology in ways that we don't understand, the unintended consequences will aggregate in a number of areas: off-target effects, and the other one is not understanding the virtue of the target that we have and why it is retained within the population pool.
if I can add, so I had a guest speaker from Church's Lab. I don't know if you know him. He's a very famous geneticist on Harvard. So there's research towards finding safe harbor gene places. So what that means is you find places in the genome that have the lowest risk of having bad secondary effects. So they found those gene loci. But now the problem is to have a high percentage delivery method. So you can imagine if you kind of have to fix almost all cells in your body, or almost a lot of brain cells, or a lot of immune cells, or whatever you need. The technology to cover, let's say, like over 50% of cells is not there yet, especially not in vivo. Like it's not even 100% there yet in a petri dish. When it becomes a more complex structure, and it's certainly not there yet in vivo. So you have to hope for to have enough change, like that enough cells get targeted to change without having a huge immune response of the delivery method. Let's say you use a virus to deliver. AAV is pretty, especially Parkinson's and stuff like that, you need to deliver into the brain. So you have to pass either the blood-brain barrier by injecting into the spine, let's say. You could do that directly into the brain or some other way. And the delivery method in animals, what is mostly used are AAV viruses. They are pretty small. They have a pretty low immune response, but still for an amount that a human would need, you would still need a lot to get the immune response. That's also the problem with the cancer treatment with those methods. There came an article out today that I shared that they found a way to have a lower immune response. The other thing you can do is you extract enough amount of the cells of that human, change the genes in a petri dish, and put them back in, and hope that that is enough to basically overcome that you have enough cells and being healthy to like cope or compensate for the unhealthy ones. You can do that also that way. And then you have the other way is to change gene expression. And I had a bunch of guests, you can listen to the replays, that have very new technology invented for that. So you don't actually change the genome, you change how the genome is being used. And that has a lot of promising. I had even a guest speaker there that found a way to do that in animals for fear, like traumatic memories, to basically make the extinction memory stronger with gene expression changes. So you have this tiny RNAs that you change the amount of these tiny RNAs, and the specific RNAs you need for the memory of basically saying that this is now a safe, like you're safe now, you don't need to have PTSD anymore. And you have different RNAs for this traumatic memory, and you try to like enforce the safe memory one. So there's a lot coming on. It's still a problem, as I said, to have enough coverage in a human without eliciting an immune response that could be quite bad.
Yeah, three quick comments. I agree with everything you said, as usual, Katerina. The first is George Church's lab is just one of the most prolific labs in the world, and one of the things that he's pioneered over the last 5 years, which is really promising in the realm of genetic engineering, is rather than change genes, if you know there's a gene that's really protective and helpful, increase the number of copies of that gene, so its output is amplified for the benefit of the health. And the animal models are very, very exciting in terms of you're not changing any sequences, you're just making more copies, and that's aligned with the notion of the epigenetic mechanisms that you were describing, Katerina. The second thing is with the blood-brain barrier and delivery of anything into the brain, there's a number of means of approaching that. There are temporary disruptions to the blood-brain barrier, whether with ultrasound or chemicals, that allow drugs that normally wouldn't get there to get into the brain, and then you can just do it very temporarily during a therapy and then stop it because the blood-brain barrier is critical. And the last thing I'll say is just a fascinating factoid, and that is George Church is very candid about the fact that his creativity derives from his narcolepsy, and I've been in many meetings with him where he just nods off regularly when he's in the audience, and he says that state of falling asleep and waking up is where he gets all his best ideas, and he has that opportunity 10 times as often as the rest of us do. So he is one of the most prolific geniuses on the planet.
I wanted to agree with both of you and also add an extra note of caution, and just go, as always, to the meta point, which is that when DNA was discovered and when they were doing the original experiments with Watson and Crick, they would remove the RNA and the protein in order to find and to do the various discoveries. And then, of course, they realized that the protein was valuable to the process, as was the RNA. In the same way, I think we have to understand that whilst we have mapped the genome, the next big project is the biome. And John, I had Cheryl send you a manuscript that's being worked through for Nature, but there is work going on in this realm, and there is a very strong, the individual who's doing this research I mentioned before, who was part of the genome project and is now working on the biome, says that the biome is the medicine cabinet of the human being, and that the work that is going to go on the biome is going to resolve many of the missing pieces of information that we need. So gene editing and looking at the genome on its own is sort of the same as looking at the DNA without the RNA and the protein.
Yeah, I also had yesterday a guest speaker. She is working on T cells, like the immune cells combined with Parkinson and Alzheimer's. So she discovered specific genes in T cells that are activated in with Parkinson's that recognize alpha-synuclein, and patients have more of those before the onset of the actual symptoms start. So this will be not just a great way of diagnosis, because she found this also in the peripheral blood, so just not from the brain, just the blood that you can take out on your arm or wherever, and also reprogramming maybe those T cells to have the immune system maybe eating up the alpha-synuclein or something like that will most likely come out of it. So you can just check out the replay, and then you can see it's Dr. Alahem. She's really great. She's in Sweden actually right now. She has a lab here in the U.S., but currently she's working on a collaboration in Sweden. So check her out. Her work is great because the immune system and the microbiome are certainly highly involved in these processes and probably make them worse. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Two quick points. One, the microbiome, as Larry Smarr, one of the true pioneers in the field, was fond of saying, you have to farm your microbiome, and the way you farm your microbiome is those same four things we talked about earlier. And there have been clubhouse sessions showing how you can adjust people's diet and exercise regimens, change their microbiome, and allow for an environment that's permissive of an immuno-oncologic drug to cure your cancer. But when you have a dysbiosis from bad lifestyle, the immuno-oncologic agent is ineffective in curing your cancer. So adopting healthy lifestyles not only helps prevent cancer, but when you have cancer, there's an active study being run out of Loma Linda to look at how diet and exercise will change the microbiome and what the impact is. Both have independently been shown to augment the effect of immuno-oncologic drugs, but they're doing in the same study a diet and exercise and microbiome assay to see how that affects the impact of these drugs in people who have succumbed, not but experienced cancer as a result of to some extent of a dysbiosis. So it's 100% correct, Ben, that the connection between the microbiome and the inflammatory system and health is extraordinary. And it's just, we really need to go back to the basics because, the pharmaceutical industry is chartered around treating disease, and not enough attention is being spent on preventing disease with really simple, difficult, but simple lifestyle changes.
John, thank you so much for sharing. And if you would care to share a link either in the chat or directly to me, I would be most happy. I think that
Which aspect of that do you want to link on? There's lots.
the survey about the cancer, exercise, and gut bacteria.
Yeah, why don't you back channel Jan Leifman, who held the room where that study was reviewed, and he invited the principal investigator. So I spoke to him, but honestly, I don't have the contact information. But Jan Leifman, Lehfman, I think, invited that speaker.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting that the big movement in health is sometimes we talk about its technology, but I think that what you just summed up very beautifully is that we have to go back to basic. If we live a lifestyle that people who lived 100 years ago was recognized as a way to live your life, you move, you sleep when it's dark, and also you eat food that are not processed, that you actually can grow on the fields directly and not super processed food, then you are already a long way on the right track. So wonderful, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 100%. And a plant-based diet is not only way healthier, but it dramatically reduces your carbon footprint. It is the number one thing we can do as individuals to reduce our carbon footprint is stop eating animal products.
Win,
Yeah,
win, win. Here we go.
I also had a guest speaker talking about a metabolite that some gut microbiomes produce that can drive anxiety in the organism. And her name is Dr. Needham. She was in my room March 11th. So if you want to check it out, and if you if you want to have some papers related to those guest speakers, I can send them because most are behind the paywall, not all. But, yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're out of headlines for today and for the week. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. Good to see Aaron and Dave back, and our two Irish brothers back in here.
And also,
and,
happy Mother's Day for those that celebrate Mother's Day on Sunday.
and I
Yeah.
think Father's Day
Happy
is
Mother's Day.
Yeah,
yeah.
Tyler.
Anyway, happy holidays, whatever the holiday is, wherever you happen to be. And have a great weekend, and we'll see you Monday.
Thank you.
Same
See you
bad
next
time, same
week.
bad channel.
Bye, Tyler.
Bye
Thank
bye,
you.
everybody.
Happy